Welcome to the third season of the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. As an autoimmune warrior myself, I understand living with chronic illness isn't easy. You're not alone. This podcast is made to give hope. I will interview individuals living with autoimmunity along with experts and businesses to help provide knowledge and support. As a health coach, I understand there is no cure for autoimmune disease, but creating small changes to lifestyle can influence how we feel. And shout out to all my listeners out there because this podcast is made possible by you. And how can you support? Glad you asked. There are 3 ways to show your support. 1, rate the show on Spotify. 2, leave a review through Apple. And 3, share the episode with a warrior so they too can have hope and be stronger than autoimmune. And enough of this intro. Let's get started. Welcome to the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. Today, I have Xenia Brandstetter, a functional medicine certified health coach and autoimmune protocol certified coach, trained to help autoimmune clients reach their health goals with an evidence-based dietary and lifestyle protocol. She went from high achieving, thriving at her job to being diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis and Crohn's disease. She is now symptom-free, and I brought her on the show to talk about how she did it. So welcome, Xenia.
Hi, Desiree. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah. Before we get into your journey and how you help others, where are you connecting from?
I'm in Cyprus right now, actually. So it's a little island in the Mediterranean.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So I'm guessing it's very beautiful over there, and you're on the other side of the world. So thank you for accommodating. And we found a time to connect.
Yeah, no problem.
And could you describe your life or what you did for fun before you got ill?
That's a really good question, actually, because I didn't do a lot of things for fun. So before I got diagnosed, I started a new job. I moved to a new city. So everything that I really did at the time was like focused on work. So sometimes on the weekends, I, like went out and explore and meet some friends. But usually I spent so much time at work that I didn't actually get to do so many things for fun. So I did yoga a lot. That was like my one outlet, if you want, but like to an extent where it did, like in hindsight, it didn't feel super healthy to me because it was the one outlet that I had. So whenever I went there, I came back, I was like exhausted, my whole body hurt, and I was like, this was a successful session, but I didn't know any better at the time. But yeah, that was the one thing I would say I did for fun, but then actually it wasn't so much fun,
Yeah. So really not having outlet, and sounds like that kind of led to your autoimmune journey because of that.
I would say, yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that kind of piled up, and like the missing bit of the work-life balance. So like the life outside of work, I would say played a really big role, because if you don't really have that and you get overwhelmed at work, especially if you're in a work environment that isn't very supportive, and like you don't have a lot of ways to handle the stress that piles up. Yeah, there isn't many ways where you can kind of get rid of that again. It just builds up, builds up, builds up, and you have nowhere to put it. So at some point, that's how I felt. So at some point, it just snapped, and I was like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
But it wasn't a complete surprise.
Yeah. And what eventually made you go to the doctor to get diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis and Crohn's disease? What was the breaking point?
It's kind of a funny story, because for the longest time, I didn't actually take any of my symptoms serious, which is probably something that a lot of us have in common, because they're very, very subtle, right? So for me, it just felt like I was really tired, I was working a lot. I was like, this is normal. Like, obviously, I need to sleep more. Um, Up to a point where I felt so exhausted. I was like, whenever I was at work, I was fantasizing about lying like under my desk and like sleeping, like taking a nap, which like obviously I couldn't do. But that was one of the things I was like, okay, this is not normal anymore. um,
Yeah,
and then
I know that feeling.
it's funny, right? Because when you describe it to someone else who's not going through autoimmune disease, they're like, that's weird, right? But like we get it kind of because it's like a very specific feeling. It's like actual fatigue. It's not being tired. It's like something completely different. It's like where you're so exhausted, you just have to lie down, right? And I
Yeah.
couldn't do that. And also I didn't take it very serious. I actually went to the doctor for something at the time I thought was unrelated, like a very specific symptom. I had chest pain, which luckily doctors take very serious, right? So they sent me to the AF, checked through, they did a complete like blood panel and everything. And then it came out that something was actually wrong with my liver. And the reason why my chest was hurting was because the liver caused me nausea a lot. So I was throwing up a lot, and that kind of hurt my chest area and everything. And then
Oh
it
my
came out,
goodness.
like that there's a liver issue going on, and um, all of that started. But yeah, it was a very scary time. But again, in hindsight, I feel like I was very lucky because it was a very specific thing that they were able to detect. They could narrow down exactly to, okay, something is going on with your liver. It took a while until they found out it was autoimmune. It took a while until they found out it was autoimmune hepatitis, to be specific. But I know from a lot of people that their diagnosis journey is not as straightforward, right? And
Right.
in that sense, I was very lucky because it like the kickoff point was like very clear for me. It was like from one day to another, this exact thing is wrong. And
Right.
then that kind of all spiraled from there.
And I'm very grateful that you had a short diagnosis journey, but it seems like you did have those symptoms for a while. What symptoms are associated with autoimmune hepatitis or Crohn's disease?
Yeah, so the Crohn's disease actually then came a bit later, and that kind of was like very much not diagnosed for the longest time because again, I thought, like indigestion, whatever, like this is kind of normal. So yeah, that was diagnosed much later actually. For the autoimmune hepatitis, it's very like it's strange symptoms for the longest time. Things like, fatigue, which is very non-specific, right? You have nausea, which I had, which for me, I didn't even think was so weird because I had a very stressful time at work before, and that always hit my stomach hard, so I couldn't
Mm.
really eat, just like I couldn't sleep, which also is a symptom, but I thought it was work. And whenever I did eat, I felt so nauseous that I like, sometimes came back up again. Like these things used to happen a lot, so I never thought about that too much at the time, right? Like going back, obviously, like that should have been a red flag, right? It wasn't. Like it also says a lot about my state of mind at the time. But yeah, it's
You
like
were very focused on work.
yeah, and also I have to say, digestive issues have always been kind of a thing for me, which is also
Mm.
why I didn't take that serious at the time. Um, I always had indigestion when I was stressed out, like I always had stomach pains when I was in like kind of a, yeah, like stressed state, whenever something was bothering me at work or like in life, I like it really hit my stomach immediately. So
Mm.
I was like, this is just me, like this is kind of how my body works. But probably there was something going on for a lot longer, and there were all kinds of flags that I ignored.
Yeah. And for people that are not aware of what autoimmune hepatitis is, would you mind just
Yeah.
mentioning what it is?
Um, So yeah, I mean, autoimmune diseases are all the diseases where the immune system that's supposed to protect ourselves, like mistakenly attacks our own body, right? So, and with autoimmune hepatitis, hepatitis is kind of just like a term for liver disease. So, or like liver, like inflammation, something going on with the liver. And we know hepatitis A, B, which is like a viral infection, which with autoimmune hepatitis, it's kind of the same thing, except that it's not caused by a virus, but by our own body. So the immune system accidentally attacking the liver, and that can become very serious. So the liver is kind of a vital organ, right? So we want this to be healthy. It has all kinds of very important functions in the body, especially when it comes to digestion and like all kinds of, like nutrient absorption and things like that. So if that disease progresses, is like not detected, or like you're not responding to medication, and that just progresses, eventually people might have to get a transplant. So it can develop into something very serious. For me, luckily, it hasn't gotten that far. So I think, first of all, it was detected relatively early. It could have been a lot better. And since then, I had all kinds of different medications that helped me a lot. And definitely since I got on the whole health train, and kind of started to lead my life in a more supportive way, I have definitely seen a lot of progress there. So the good thing with the liver is that it's able to repair itself a lot. So I would say it has to be extremely damaged for you to not be able to repair it, at least to a degree where it's functioning. So there's that.
No, thank you for explaining. I just haven't had anybody on my podcast with autoimmune hepatitis, so I wanted to educate the
Yeah.
audience what it's like and the symptoms, what to be aware of, just in case. What medications did you take or were you taking at the time?
Um, like I would say the usual suspects. So there's definitely steroids involved whenever there's any kind of inflammation, right? Like in the beginning to really stop that fast. Then there's all kinds of different immunosuppressants that you can take. I went through a few because I didn't tolerate them well. I actually got a lot worse in the beginning. I had like really high fever for a long time. So like allergic reactions to different medications. So it was a difficult journey until we found one that worked for me. And I would say even then it was a bit tricky because there's different ways how you can respond to medication, right? There's a, I forgot the term now, how you say it, but like a complete response, I would say, or like a full response, and there's a non-response, and then there's something like a partial response, right? Where your body is like, or your liver in that case is like getting a little bit better, but not all the way. So it's like, is this medication working? Is it not working? Like, is this whole process where, unfortunately, medicine is not as evolved to be perfect in these things, right? So it's a lot of trial and error until you figure out what works for you, if something works for you, and yeah, it can be a very long road.
Yeah. How long has it been since you were first diagnosed?
It was beginning of 2018, so that would be 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
If I'm correct.
Yeah. And now, what does your regimen look like? Do you take any medications? What what does your day look like with Xena?
That's a really good question. So yeah, I still take medication. Um, it was it used to be a really big deal for me. I was like, I don't want to take any of this. I'm getting like terrible side effects. It was a whole, like, that's kind of how my health journey really started. I was like, I want to get rid of this because is horrible. Like it's not helping me. Like this is not going well. By now, I would say my mentality has changed a lot, or like my attitudes toward my medication, because it has helped me a lot from the point where I was also able to support that a lot with all kinds of lifestyle changes that I did. So sometimes people are like, oh, like you're taking medication, like, like just, you're not actually healthy, are you? But like, I feel completely fine. I feel better than I used to before I was sick. Like when I was still healthy at the time, I feel better than before I took any medication at all, right? So for me, taking medication is not really what determines if I'm healthy or not, right? Like the way how I'm
Right.
feeling is
Yeah.
what differentiates that for me. And I think there's a lot of things we can do while taking medication that really get us to the point where we say, okay, we feel completely healthy, right? Like, and then also the medication isn't something that has to hold us back. It's not something that like it doesn't give us any side effects anymore, right? We don't have to get the symptoms from our disease, and we also don't have to get the symptoms from our medication. So I find that it's always an interesting topic with my clients,
No.
because many new clients that I have that come in that are like, I don't want to take medication. I'm like, why? Like what is your deal with that? Why is that so important to you? Like, why is that a
Yeah.
priority for you, right? Um, and then it's like an awkward conversation where it's like, oh, like, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't I want to, like, why would, how do you say it? Why would I want to, obviously nobody wants to take them, right? But
Right.
at the same time, why is it such a big deal for some people?
Yeah. It could be a stigma. It could be really like
Exactly.
the people that, I mean, if you can join
Yeah.
the conventional medicine with more functional medicine and lifestyle, why not? I mean,
Yeah,
I guess
exactly.
I'm on your camp. And then you have the other camp where some people don't want, they'd want everything natural. And if it's not natural, they don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. And
But
also like the whole definition of like what's being healthy, right? Like if you're taking medication, does that have to mean that you're a sick person? It doesn't really have to mean that, right? So I think these are usually things that I really like to discuss with my clients and like find out why they feel so strongly one way or another. And also once you're on medication, like these medications are often used lifelong, right? Immunosuppressants. It's a
mhm,
very, very long process to get off them. So I
right.
personally, I see that happening in my future just from the past experiences that I've had and like the improvements that I've seen. Um, it's also something that my doctors are very aware. We talked about this. If I can be taken off the medication, I want to try that. When I also feel that it's safe, like I think to a degree, there's really this like risk that we don't have to take. Like I don't want to do this at any price, right? So I think once I'm at a place, and I feel like I am at a good place right now where this is not a concern for me. Like if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like I'm fine either way, as long as really I feel as good as I think I can feel right now. So that is what is important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like you are really plugging into your clients and asking these questions so they could be aware of what's important to them, getting their values
Yeah.
brought up. And since we're on the topic of working with your clients, what's the first thing you do to help them gain their life back or their health back?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think usually when new clients come in, they have a very specific idea of where they want to start. And I think most people who are kind of, health aware and have like Googled like how can I like deal with autoimmune diseases will come across diet, right? It's one of the biggest topics, I think. And most clients that I have will come and be like, okay, I want to change my diet. Like, where do I start? Can you help me with this? And I'm like, yeah, of course. But at the same time, this is not where I would want to start. Like, with no client will I start with the diet immediately. For the simple reason that I have started there personally when I started this whole journey. and it went terribly wrong. Like it did not go well at all.
Mm.
I had a very, very bad experience with changing my diet and like changing it again, and like recalibrating and doing all of these things. And it was so overwhelming at the time because, first of all, I did it completely on my own. I had no idea what I was doing. I read like all of these books, and like every book was telling me something else. And I was like, this makes sense. Like, I will follow this. I read a new book, was like, this tells me something different. Like, this also makes sense, but like, how do these two, like, they don't make sense together? So, like, it's this whole jungle that can be very, very overwhelming. And even if you find out, okay, like, this is the path I want to take now, the road I want to go with, the diet I want to go with, going through this journey of changing your diet is a very stressful experience and can be very, very overwhelming. And for someone who is struggling with symptoms of an autoimmune disease, it's simply not an easy place to start. It's really hard, and it's like this huge task that you need the tools kind of to deal with this, right? So that's why I don't like to start with diet. Instead, what I want to start with is really working with clients on how do we approach this whole health topic, right? Like, how do we deal with things like diet changes, but also other kinds of lifestyle changes? Like, further down the line, we would want to talk about optimizing sleep, optimizing movement, things like that. But before all of this, I really want to work with them on how do we do all of this, right? Like their mindset, like all of this mind work is really, really important to me, because often clients come in and they come from they're like led by fear, right? They're like, this is scary, this is happening to me, I don't know how to stop it, like, who knows what's going to happen? And this fear is like, can be a powerful driver up to a certain point, but then it doesn't work very well as a motivator. So if we want to go through this journey together, and we have setbacks every now and then, fear isn't a very strong motivator to overcome those. And it's not a very, it doesn't feel good to us if we're driven
Right. It's
with
very
fear, right?
stressful
Like,
to,
exactly. It's very, very
change.
stressful. So that's one of the first things I want to change with them, right? I want to work with them where they come from a place of love, if you want, right? Like where their body is so important to themselves. They love their body so much that they want good things for it, right? They want it to heal. Not because, like they don't want things to get worse, but because they actually want good things for them. They want a good future for them. They want all health for themselves, right? And that's a really powerful process. I find if you do that in the beginning, right, and really ask, like, where are you coming from? Like, where do you want to go? What are your kind of your visions for the future, right? Like, how do you see yourself if you didn't have that disease, right? If that was not something that held you back, where would you be now? And like, where do you want to go? Establishing these things so they really understand how valuable their life is, how valuable their health is, and also working on how do they talk to themselves, right? Like, can you see this like self-love reflected in how they treat themselves? Because we often have like a very, very mean inner voice that's kind of beating us down on top of all the health issues that we're already
Right.
living with, right? And um,
That
for example,
negativity
yeah,
bias.
exactly. And
Hmm.
if you're struggling with all these symptoms from your disease, if you then also have this inner voice who's like, oh, you're tired again, like, can you not even get through the day? It's like, that's not helping. So that's something I work with them to shift that into something that's like a supportive voice, right? Where they're like, okay, like, I see you're tired, body, like, I recognize it, I will give you some rest now, I will support you, we will get through this day together. Like, if you have an inner voice like that, the whole journey is going to be so much easier, right? And yeah, that is, in short, or in long if you want, where I usually start.
Yeah, no, that is wonderful. It's a place of starting a place from healing, and
Exactly.
really your body is always trying to take care of you,
Yeah.
and if you listen to it, it's just gonna, those signals of tiredness, is like you said, or or headache is like, okay, well, body, what are you really telling me? And did I not sleep enough? Am I thirsty? Did I need more water? Or am I
Exactly.
really hungry? Or am I just stressed out about being anxious about my doctor's appointment tomorrow? So it's really, instead of coming at a place of fear and being upset with having an autoimmune disease, see your body more as you're a miracle and you're constantly talking to me. And I just need to, talk to my body like, you know, like it's a person, like it's
Yeah,
your best
exactly.
friend. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that you said something really important, like this whole like being able to talk to the body and listen to it, right? Like we have forgotten how that works. We have forgotten that our body actually sends us a lot of signals, right? And it tells us exactly what it needs, but we usually suppress it and we ignore it, and then we become like kind of deaf to it, and we can't hear it anymore, right? And or
Yeah.
we don't want to hear it. So learning how that whole process works. So once you do start with lifestyle changes, you can also hear if they work for your body, right? Your body will tell you, like, do you sleep enough? Do you need more sleep? Do you need more rest? Like these things, if you can't listen to that voice, you're not ready to progress to changing
The
all of these
next.
things, right? And the
Mhm.
same is with food, right? Like the, in this whole process of changing someone's diet, we want them to be able to feel, is a specific food working for you? Is it not working for you? Like, do you experience any symptoms when you eat it? Do you feel better or worse when you eat it? These are things that your body will tell you, but you have to know how
Be
to listen for
attuned.
it. Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's why you can't start there. Like, first of all, you have to really start with that inner voice.
Yeah. The paying attention. I think the reason, like you said, people have autoimmune disease or get autoimmune disease because they've been ignoring their bodies for so long. Kind of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you mentioned you were a workaholic, and um, some people, or you thought, oh, it's just natural to get sick when I'm stressed. Well, and some people have grown up with these signals that they just progressively get worse instead of listening to it, like maybe I should listen to my body.
Yeah.
But that leads into how you start your conversation with your clients. But can you talk about something you mentioned in one of the questions, how your clients and you don't identify as autoimmune warriors? So, what are some ways of identifying, or specifically, how do you help your clients accept it instead of fighting it, their autoimmune disease?
Yeah, so that's a really important topic for me, like something I'm really passionate about it, because a really big part of the autoimmune community identifies as autoimmune warriors. And if that works for them and it helps them, that's great. Like I respect that and I appreciate that. For me personally, I always had really negative emotions attached to that term, like the term warrior specifically, because it implies that there's this, I was, like in the beginning of my whole health journey, and like I had all these things coming at me. I was like, I don't want to be a warrior. Like I have no energy for this. I cannot fight. Like I don't want to do this. I just want to like go to sleep. And like this was it just like this, just the term drained me in a way, because all of the emotions that I had attached with this warrior and like fighting and everything, for me it was very negative, because it didn't give me any room really to accept that, okay, this is happening, like this is a part of me, right? Like I think that the issue there is also, autoimmune disease is not like cancer, if you will, right? It's not like that there is something in your body that isn't supposed to be there. There's no like, there's no thing that you have to get rid of. This is your own body doing something it's not supposed to do, right? So there isn't really anything to fight. You can't fight your immune system. Like you want your immune system to be there. You don't want it to go away. So for me, that was always this whole concept of fighting this disease. It can only backfire because if I like, what would I even fight? Like I have an autoimmune liver condition and an autoimmune gut condition. Like, am I fighting my liver now? Am I fighting my immune system? Like, what? This it didn't make any sense for me, right? So that was something that I was struggling a lot with. And when I talked to my clients, I heard from many that it's similar for them because it kind of stops them from being able to accept what's happening and assume almost this attitude of, you know, like, no, this is not happening to me. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to fight this. Like we're not like there not really in this like headspace where you've accepted, okay, this is what's happening, right? This is what I'm living with now. This is what my body is doing. And the thing is, acceptance doesn't mean giving up. That's not at all what it means. But for many people, that makes it a lot easier to then move forward because you're leaving all of this fight, all of this baggage in the past, and you can kind of move forward with a clean slate. And you'll be like, okay, this is happening. Like, this is what my immune system is doing. It's okay. Like, it made a mistake, right? Like, obviously, it didn't mean to attack me. Like, my body isn't hating me, but it is what it is. What do I do now? And I think if that's an attitude we can assume and just be like, okay, interesting that this is happening, but from here on we go forward. We don't have to like fight this fight. Like now we're thinking about how do we support this immune system, or how do we support this part of ourselves so it can heal, right? So it can like get back to normal again in a way, which for me isn't the same thing as fighting it, because the fight would say at the end we want to eliminate it, which we don't want. So there's a bit of a conflict for me in that term. And yeah, I just want people to know that there's also a different way of thinking about it that doesn't have to include this whole fight in the name, right? So
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, that's
kind
wonderful.
of my philosophy.
Yeah, and that was a question that I found. I mean, because some people identify differently, like you said, and for me, I identified with warrior not because of the fight, but I wanted to be stronger as a person. And I see like a war more strategic, more, you know, how will we combat, you know, this? And because war is very strategic. It's not just let's just bomb these people or eliminate them. It's very, how do we work this out so it's a win, you know? And but again, I mean, that's why everybody's got different perspectives, and you don't work with one person. It sounds like this, you're like this, but you don't work with one person the same as you do with another. I mean, Susie Q is different from, you know, David, and David's different from Emmanuel. Everybody, you can't really, I mean, genuine, you know, it's all about lifestyle and mindset and body awareness and all these different things. But you cannot say, like, kind of like you said, you were very confused about where to start with your diet.
Yeah.
You know, that's why there's so many different diets, because not one thing works for one person. So no, I really appreciate your opinion and hearing that side of your story of how a war could be very triggering for people, and it's not the same for everybody. So that's wonderful to hear. Thank you, Rosina.
And I also really appreciate you like talking about how you feel about that term, right? Because like you said, everybody really interprets it in a different way, and I find that really interesting. But yeah, it's kind of exactly that. Like someone thinks about it that way, someone thinks about it the other way. So for example, when you said you wanted to feel strong, which of course, like that's how I wanted to feel too. At the same time, I felt like I felt so weak, right? And I didn't feel like at the time I didn't identify as a warrior. And that made me so embarrassed for myself. Like I felt so bad about
Mm.
myself because I didn't have that strength. So another thing for me was that I kind of gave myself permission to feel weak sometimes, not to feel super
Mm.
strong. But yeah, I really love how you can like interpret it that way or this way or that way. So
Yeah,
I do think we definitely attract our tribe also with the ways we interpret certain terms, right? So I think that would be something where um, you kind of look for people who have a similar understanding of things than you do, right? Or who think
absolutely.
similarly about different things. And that's what I really love about our community, that you can find people with all kinds of beliefs and convictions and like ways of thinking about things, and you'll always find someone who's kind of there in your corner with you.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, that's what makes humans so beautiful that, I mean, we're in a subset all alone, right? Already with autoimmune disease. Well, first of all, we're women, and then we have autoimmune disease. And then, beyond that is, finding out, okay, do I really connect with this one person? Do I feel like the way what what they're saying works for me? And yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what's a beautiful thing about humans, that we all have our own, like, I like how you put it, own tribes. We have a tribe within a tribe.
Yes.
And how, I know you said when you work with somebody, um, you have different ways of healing. So, how do you help them to find that balance, like you mentioned, instead of becoming overly obsessive with food or any aspect of their journey? How do you help them maintain that balance to where they accept that, like you said, weakness, or they accept that
Yeah.
strength or whatever?
Yeah. It's something, again, that's very important to me because in my own journey, I felt like balance was really the one thing that I was lacking. And that's why for the longest time, it wasn't working the way that I expected it to work, right? So when for example, if you go back to diet, right, which is where I spent so much time, so much energy, so much effort, and it led to nothing, or like it made me feel even sicker. The one thing that I did there was really obsess about it, and like everything I did was diet focused. Like, is this food gonna be healthy? Healthy? Is this food gonna be like unhealthy? Is this like, can I eat this? Can I eat that? Like eliminating all kinds of different foods because I thought they were going to be bad for me. And it's very triggering for a lot of people who already have kind of a difficult relationship with food. And there's studies that link autoimmune disorders with disordered eating, actually, which I find really interesting because um, that is definitely something that happened to me, right? Where eating for my autoimmune disease, eating like in a way that I thought was going to be healthy,
Triggered.
pushed me more and more into disordered eating. And at the end, I was like, like I hate food. Like I am so scared of like eating. In the end, like I lost so much weight, and it can go so fast, right? And especially with autoimmune disorders that are somewhere in the gut area, right? Like everything concerning the digestive system, which
Well, especially Crohn's disease. I mean, if you don't know
exactly,
you have
especially
it,
Crohn's
it
disease.
really,
Yeah, like you see like all of these like different yeah IBDs, kind of all conditions really that concern the gut that are so strongly linked to what you eat or how you eat. Um, they are a huge trigger for disordered eating, and once you've gone down that spiral, it's really really hard to come back. And I think especially when you're working alone and you don't really have that awareness, like where is it getting dangerous, where is this stuff healthy, it can go really wrong. And I think that's something that isn't really talked about enough in that whole autoimmune community, but also in the whole like dieting community, right? Like whenever you research diets, it's like everything is geared towards weight loss. Like,
Eating.
yeah, especially
Well,
or like
yeah.
even with autoimmune diets like the AIP, for example, like so many people lose weight and they see that as a good thing, right? Like, oh, like another bonus, you might lose weight. For someone who's already underweight or like dealing with weight issues,
It really
that's
becomes
really
a
scary,
downward
right? And
spiral.
yeah, and like how do they change their diet in a safe way without losing more weight or
Yeah.
without being triggered if they have a history of disordered eating or something. So
Yeah.
it's really all about balance there. And I think that's another reason why I would never start with things like diet. I would always start with the mindset first, because they give us a basis for really having this awareness: what is healthy and what is unhealthy, and why are we
Right.
doing all of this for. So once once we've done that first step, we've set the basis for that. When we go to diet next, a person is able to say, okay, this doesn't feel healthy anymore right now, right? Like I'm doing all these changes in my diet, back to that example, and it feels good, and like suddenly it doesn't feel good anymore. And now it starts to feel really difficult, and it starts to like not go the way that I thought it would go. It just doesn't seem like it leads me to health anymore, right? Instead, this leads me to feeling worse. This
Mm-hmm.
is a red flag. And now a person can identify that. And now they can be like, okay, I want to recalibrate. I'm going to go back to where this felt safe, where this felt supportive. And the same with exercise, right? Like people, when they start to be like movement conscious, and they're like, okay, now I want to work on a new exercise routine and have more exercise in my life. If you have the strength for it, it's really easy to suddenly do too much, because you think there's no too much of a good thing, right? Like if little is helping, a little more of that is going to help even more, but that's not really the case. Like the opposite is
Yeah.
actually true, right? Because it's just another stressor for our body. Um, and when we're able to feel that we're crossing this line into like, this doesn't feel good anymore, this doesn't feel healthy, this doesn't feel supportive,
It's already
then we
too
can
late
go back again.
by that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, I mean, working with someone who is a bit aware of these things is really helpful here, because when you're on your own, this can be very difficult to see. So especially people who already have difficulties like that, had difficulties like that in the past. For example, someone who was struggling with disordered eating even before they have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. That's really something where they would want to spend extra attention. Maybe pick someone who has an understanding in that area and work with them, because it can be really dangerous. And I think that's something
Yeah.
that people don't talk about enough.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that. I mean, women have so many pressures on
Yeah.
themselves. So I'm glad that you mentioned, 80% of people that have autoimmune disease are women. And then if you have a lot of women already had that stigma, I have to look a certain way. So that is already associated, like you said, with disordered eating. And then you add in exercise, and a lot of people think, oh, yeah, well, I need to exercise. And so you layer that on top, and it's just stress and fear layered on top of each other.
Exactly.
And I'm glad you start with the mindset, because it sounds like you really need to connect with the mind and body first before adding all these different layers of trying to be this different person.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly, because I think even on top, you have sometimes this layer of body image with autoimmune, where many autoimmune conditions, they can affect how you look, right? Or the medication that you take can affect how you look. So not only do you feel terrible, you might also not look the way that you think you should look or you want to look, and then that mixed with like eating and exercise and everything, it's just it can go really wrong.
absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. What do you think are some of the biggest reasons people get so stuck in their chronic illness symptoms? And I guess we kind of touched on a few of those, but I would
Yeah.
like to find your opinion.
I think for me, there's probably two really big reasons why people get stuck. So one would be, and that we talked about in a sense, if you're resisting your disease a lot, right, and you're not able to move to acceptance, and you can't work through this initial bit of, like, this is happening, like, now I take it as it is and I move forward. If that happens, right, and people that just resist the diagnosis, they're like, no, this is not happening to me, I don't want this to be true, there's no way they will move forward in a way that's supportive, right? And you can be stuck in that period of time for a long time, right, where you're not actually ready to do anything about what's happening. And that's fine, right? Like, some people just need a lot of time to get over that in the beginning. Everyone kind of
it's a
grieves
grieving
differently.
process.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone grieves a little differently, right? Like, some people need a lot more time than others. Some people also need a lot more support than others, though, during that time. And not everyone just moves through this naturally. Like, sometimes you're stuck there, right? And you need someone to help you pull you through that process. I would say that is one reason. And the other reason could be someone is literally stuck because they are frozen as part of, like, the whole fight and flight process, right? Like, there's this fight and flight response that we have when we're very stressed, and, like, biologically or, like, evolutionary, that's how our body is programmed, right? If you're under a lot of pressure, if it's a very stressful situation, if in today's life we have a lot of chronic stressors every day, where we're constantly in this fight or flight response, and you can kind of, this response is actually much bigger than fight or flight, right? Another aspect of it would be freeze. And many people who I find consider themselves stuck, right? Which in itself, it's like another word for frozen, right? Like, you literally can't move. It's a way of the body to protect ourselves, right? Because it's not ready to do anything, like, literally paralyzed, overwhelmed of the situation. And I think people who are like chronic contemplators, for example, right? For many people, sure, like, some of them are also contemplating for whatever reasons, but many people who contemplate are also in this fight, flight, freeze circle, kind of stuck there because they're too scared to move forward, right? Like, all the options kind of look dreadful. Like, there's nothing that they're really excited about doing. Instead, everything feels overwhelming. Everything feels scary. Nothing feels safe. That's also a group of people who are stuck in this journey, this health journey, because their bodies are not ready to move forward yet. So that, I would say, is kind of the second group of people.
Yeah. No, thank you. And that is very true. You get stuck in either or camp, with all the options, diet, exercise. Well, where do I start?
Exactly. And everything is a lot of work and nothing seems really fun, right? So especially if you're already overwhelmed and you have no energy, and then you're supposed to, like, change your whole diet and your whole way of life, like, it doesn't sound fun, right? So
No, yeah.
there's a lot of work required upfront for someone to be actually ready to move forward.
Yeah. I often say this sounds so opposite of you. Of what probably you would say, but I literally say you have to kill that person that you were before you got autoimmune disease. Just because you have to lose your mind and kill off that other person, because you cannot do the same things that you did before you got autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just a visual of that thing you did before. Probably won't do it again, at least for a long time. And you can't have the same mindset. So it's losing your mind, killing off that other body and let's start over, literally dust off the eraser boards and let's do this. Um,
Yeah, you're right. I would probably like use different phrasing, but it's probably the same. Maybe again, it's very aggressive. But yeah,
I
no,
know.
I totally agree. Like you have to literally become a different person, right? And I think I would use more maybe a metaphor of a butterfly, right? To evolve into something stronger, more beautiful, more ready for that journey. But essentially, it's the same thing, right? Like
Yeah.
what you said, you can't do what you've always done if you want things to change. Like you have to do something differently to also end up in a different place eventually.
Yeah. Well, Albert Einstein saying, literally the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and
Yeah,
over again. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, it's so funny that we are in the same, like we were just talking about, we're talking about the same thing, but using totally different words, and it really relates to different people.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Like you have to kind of hear what reasons with you more. It's the same thing that probably most of us are talking about, but with different words that have different emotions and kind of, like lead
yeah.
to little, yeah, little, how do you say, details really in the process where like
Mhm.
this is a bit nuanced, this is a bit nuanced, and you find the one that kind of matches
Works
with
for
you the
you.
most and
Yeah.
aligns with you the most. Yeah.
On your website, you mentioned there are 3 things that you work with people, and you mentioned helping somebody find their own peace. So how did you find your own peace?
Yeah. So we talked about this a bit, I think, with the whole, um, warrior term. For me, that was part of my own peace process, right? Like, and like it's already in the term. Instead of the whole fighting and warrior, for me, it was the peace that I really wanted, right? Like, I didn't want the fight. Like, I couldn't. It was too intense for me. It was too stressful for me. So what I really craved was peace. And yeah, I think what was important for me in that process was um, being able to accept my immune system for what it is and not hate on it. And that was kind of what I attached to this whole term, like warrior and fighter and everything. I didn't want to be that. Like I'm a lover, not a fighter. So for me,
Yeah.
it was like, how do I, instead of hating on my immune system, how do I start to love it again, right? Like, how do I start to appreciate it for what it is? And like, and with it, like my whole body, because I think we often become very stuck in this negative energy around our own bodies and our persons, where we're like, oh, like you betrayed me, body, like you're not working like the way I want you to work. And it's not very helpful, right? It's not very supportive. And it just keeps pulling us down. So for me, it was really about how do I make peace with my immune system and kind of with myself, with the disease, and if you want, right? And um, it's a lot of mindset work that I also work on with my clients. Simple but complex exercise that I have, which many people find a bit curious, but maybe interesting. Like a little point where they can start is writing a love letter to their immune system, right? Which is super hard because if you have a lot of negative feelings attached to something, and many of us do to the immune system, right? Um, it's hard to suddenly get into this whole different mindset, assume this whole different perspective. Where like, what are actually the things that I love about my immune system, right? And like, how can I um, take all this negative energy and like kind of transform it into something positive and supportive? And it's a really fun exercise. I also have a kind of a template love letter on my website that people can download if they want to have a look and get some inspiration, get some ideas. But yeah, I think that is one of the practices that can really help to make that internal peace and to kind of give up this fight, if that is what people want to do.
Yeah, I love that idea. And how do you how did you learn how to connect your own body? I know you mentioned, the mindset of the piece, but any exercises that you did for yourself or do with your clients that help connect with their body?
Yeah, so I think that part is really difficult because kind of what I just mentioned, right? Like we have so many negative feelings attached to our bodies, and we feel betrayed by them, and we feel disappointed by them. So there's a really big rift between our mind and our body, where we often like even stop identifying with our bodies, right? We're like, oh, like this is not really my body. Like this is not what my body used to be. This doesn't even like I don't look like myself anymore. Things like that. So um, when we work on mindset, we learn to make that connection a bit more again, right? Like we learn how to identify with the bodies a bit more again. Then it's really things like, also, I mean, the exercises, or not really exercises if you want, but I have a whole module around how you're able to support your body again, right? And that's really what I mean by that, like connecting with your body. Like how do you support it, and like how do you support it in a loving way? How do you build that relationship again? And it's things like, what does your body really need? So after we learn how to listen to it, like how do we give it what it really needs, right? If our body is craving rest, what does rest look like? Like how much rest are you getting during the day? Are you able to adjust that, right? Like are you able to get more rest if that's what your body needs? If your body is craving movement, what kind of movement are you getting? Are you giving it, right? Like what types of different movements are there? Like, is it possible that you're doing something that you think helps, but actually your body doesn't really want that, for your body just doesn't feel good? Is it possible to try something else? So that would be things that we would do. And also food is a big area where I would work on with my clients in this whole body um, module, because that is really a way how we can connect with our bodies again, right? Like we literally, it's about feeding our bodies so they have more
Yeah, the
energy, right? So they have
nutrients.
fuel. Exactly. So that's something that we really forget. Like the whole eating process is so our body works. And it can be very emotional, positive and negative, and making sure it's as positive as possible is the key here, right? Because it's like eating is supposed to be a positive experience. It's supposed to be something that brings us joy and
Yeah, connects
makes us
people.
feel good, and it connects people, connects ourselves with our bodies. Like it's a beautiful thing, and it's something we might have to relearn again.
Yeah, it sounds like you really get in depth with your clients. And you also mentioned that you're able to help them learn who their true self is. And I'm curious on the how you go about that, as far as how did you learn that? I mean, I know you mentioned you wanted more peace, but before you were a workaholic. So
Yeah.
how, through these 5 years, how have you, what things have you done for yourself to connect to your true self?
Yeah, so for me, for the longest time, I would say I was not really in tune with my true self, because I never really put in the effort to get to know myself like that. Like it's not usually something very close friends talk about, who we talk to with about our like deepest values, desires, dreams, and things like that. But often these are things that we kind of keep inside, if we even know them. But often we also don't even know them. Like we never really go there and really like get to the core of ourselves. And so I feel like when you then add a big life event, like being faced with a diagnosis of autoimmune disease, that kind of tends to just run your life. And you get further and further away from this person you are. Deep down inside, you forget about that person. Everything is just like disease related. And many people forget who they really are above and beyond, like,
Autoimmune
or
disease,
their
a
disease
diagnosis.
has been, and if that's your mindset, if this is the whole approach, and you can't differentiate that anymore, you're never going to be healthy again. Like, you can't overcome that. You can't heal. You can't move away from that. So,
Yeah.
um, I was stuck in that
In that loop.
zone for a really long time, and I was like, why am I not making progress? Like, why am I still feeling so bad? And it was really because I didn't even know what I was healing for. Like, there was no point for me to move forward because my whole identity was the disease. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I
No,
felt at the
it
time.
does.
Yeah, so it was really like, why am I even doing all of this? Like, I didn't have any like goals at the time. I didn't have any like dreams. Nothing was important to me except for feeling better, but that doesn't make out a person, right? So at the time, I had my own coach, who challenged me to question, like, why am I doing this for, right? Like, well,
Yeah.
what are the bigger things in my life, um, that don't really have anything to do with my disease, right? Like, who am I at my core, and why am I doing this? And that's something for me that changed everything, because
Mm.
I got to know like who I am again, and why this whole healing process is so important to me, right? That I have goals outside of just being healthy, that like there's a purpose to my life, for which I need my health to be in place. And that's why
Yeah.
it's a core pillar of my program now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny that, I mean, not funny, but I will ask you this question now, because I asked you this question. It was my first question. What did you do for fun before you got sick? So now I'll ask you, what do you do for fun now, Xenia?
Yeah, I love that you asked that, because it doesn't have anything to do with my health. I mean, maybe it has everything to do with my health, but technically, like, it doesn't really at first thought. Now like, my whole life is kind of organized in a way that it gives me the most joy. Like, when I wake up in the mornings, I don't like rush to check my emails first thing, like, I take my time, because I know that the more time I have in the mornings, the slower I can start my mornings, the more fun it is for me, the more enjoyable it is for me. So I would sit down, like, drink my tea or something, like, sit down with my cat. That's something I do for fun, just to relax in the morning, maybe meditate, if I have some time. It's not like, I wouldn't consider that like a hobby of mine or anything, but that's just like, for me, a relaxing way to start the day, which makes everything so much better. And
Yeah.
then I always make time for the things that are important to me. Like, I go to pottery class now, right? Which I started when I was sick. Like, I've never done this before in my life. And now it's one of my favorite things in the world. I paint with watercolors, which again is a hobby I picked up in my healing journey, because I was like, I'm not doing anything for fun. Like, nothing I do is just because I like doing it. Like, no way to monetize it, like, no way to um, call it like a productive thing. It's not about being productive. And that was a really big shift for me. So now I do, yeah, like, my whole life is really structured around these little things that bring me joy, like going for a hike on the weekend, because I also have the energy now to do all of these things, right? And it made my life a million times better. And that's, I think, also why I often say, like, I feel better now than before I was even sick. Like, if we go back to the question with the medication, right? Like, yeah, I take medication. Does it hold me back? No. Like, I live like 150% at where I used to be when I was healthy before. So that it's not really a topic for me. I don't care about that at all, because I have so much joy and so much fun in my life, that I didn't have before. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
No problem. And how can people find you and work with you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's xeniabrandstetter.com. I hope we can link it somewhere, because it's a difficult name.
No, not
And
at all. Just kidding.
and yeah, so people can get in touch with me there. I have a little button where they can book a call or just scroll all the way down and just immediately book a call on my calendar, and we can chat about all of your questions. That would be the easiest way really to get in touch.
Yeah, and then they can also play with that letter, the immune system letter, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they'll also find that on my website. They cannot miss it.
Thank you so much for your time, and sorry it's so late over there. I appreciate you working with me and finding a meetup time.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it at all. I had so much fun. I'm really glad we got to do this.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Autoimmune Warriors and others. I really appreciate your support and listening. I want you to be aware of 4 companies. One is Isla Health. They make it easy and helpful to track your lifestyle to reduce flares. But it's more than a tracking app. Isla Health uses data to develop a personalized care plan that works for your life. So why not check it out? Number 2, Adapt Naturals by Chris Kresser. I'm excited to let you know about BioAvail Multi. It gives you the full spectrum of ingredients that you need to thrive, like essential vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. So go to adaptnaturals/DES15. Use my code DES15, DEZ, to get 15% off your first order. And number 3, it is a autoimmune community, Brightly Thrive. Yes, it is an inclusive, fun space to learn, grow, heal, and shine brightly with others that are facing autoimmune challenges just like you. And last but not least is Leap Cure. Check out how you can benefit from their company and what their latest clinical trial is. So, thank you so much and be stronger than autoimmune. Until next time. Guess who I just connected with, warriors? Leap Cure. Leap what? Leap Cure. Leap Cure connects patients with clinical trials to make research more equitable and efficient. Listen to their latest clinical trial.
If you've been diagnosed with thyroid eye disease and are seeking potential new treatment options, you might be interested in the LIDS clinical trial. If you're 18 and over, have a diagnosis of Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, and are interested in potentially participating in research, you can fill out a short questionnaire at lpcur.com/TED. You'll be connected with someone on the team to determine whether it might be a good fit for you. Check your eligibility and learn more at lpcur.com/TED.